In the Middle Ages, fear was a weapon, and torture was a way to control people. Today, we will show the most cruel methods of punishment that really existed, and which will make your blood run cold. Iron Maiden. The Iron Maiden is considered one of the most famous and gruesome torture devices in medieval Europe. It was a large metal structure in the shape of a human body, similar to a sarcophagus or a cupboard. Inside were long metal spikes, arranged so that they pierced the victim's body, but did not always kill him immediately. As the door slowly closed, the person received dozens of wounds and died from pain, bleeding, or infection. What was especially terrifying was that some of the spikes were specifically placed so that the victim remained alive as long as possible. Most often, this punishment was applied to people accused of heresy, treason, or particularly serious crimes. During the Inquisition, similar methods were used to intimidate the population and extract confessions. Sometimes the Iron Maiden herself was displayed in dungeons or in squares so that people could see what awaited criminals. Many historians debate how often this device was actually used, but its image has become a symbol of medieval cruelty. In the dark stone dungeons, such a structure looked especially scary. That is why the Iron Maiden often appears in horror films and historical documentaries. Wheeling. Wheeling was one of the most painful and longest executions in Europe. The condemned person was tied to a large wooden wheel, after which the executioner began to break his arms, legs, and ribs, one by one with a heavy hammer or metal rod. The person often remained conscious even after numerous blows. After the torture, the body was fixed on a high pole or left in the square as a warning to others. Sometimes the victim died only after many hours or even days. Such a punishment was usually imposed on robbers, murderers, traitors, and people who were considered especially dangerous. In medieval Europe, public executions were part of the intimidation of the population. Crowds of people gathered in the squares to watch the torment of the condemned. The authorities deliberately made these punishments as brutal as possible so that others would be afraid to break the law. In some cases, executioners would intentionally keep the victim alive longer to prolong the suffering. Wheeling became one of the darkest symbols of the judicial system of the time. A pear of flour. The torture pear was a small metal device that resembled a pear. Inside was a mechanism that allowed the metal parts to gradually open. The device was inserted into the mouth, and sometimes into other parts of the victim's body, after which it was slowly expanded from the inside. This caused unbearable pain and severe injuries. The person often could not even scream due to severe damage to the mouth and jaws. Such torture was especially common during the Inquisition. The torture pear was used against people accused of heresy, witchcraft, blasphemy, or immoral behavior. In those days, the church and authorities severely punished any deviation from the established rules. Sometimes, the very sight of this instrument forced people to confess even before the torture began. Many such devices are now kept in museums of medieval torture. Because of its cruelty, the torture pear became one of the most famous symbols of the Inquisition. Rat torture. Rat torture was one of the most horrific psychological and physical tortures. A metal cage with hungry rats was placed on the victim's stomach or chest. Then the top of the cage was heated with fire or hot metal. The rats, trying to escape the heat, began to gnaw through the human body. The victim died in terrible agony from pain, bleeding, and infection. Such methods were used during wars, interrogations, and political persecutions. Rat torture was especially often used on spies or prisoners from whom they wanted to obtain information. Even the preparation for torture itself caused people panic and intense fear. In many cases, the victims confessed before the procedure began. Due to its particular cruelty, this type of torture became a symbol of human cruelty and sadism. Stories about such torture are often used in films and books because of their horror. Bronze bull. The bronze bull was one of the most famous executions of the ancient world. It was a large hollow statue of a bull made of bronze. The condemned person was locked inside, after which a huge fire was lit under the statue. The metal gradually heated up, and the person inside was literally roasted alive. A special design was created so that the victim's scream sounded outside like the roar of an animal. According to legend, This method of execution was used to punish enemies of the ruler, rebels, and especially dangerous criminals. In those days, public executions were often a demonstration of the power of the authorities. People were deliberately punished as cruelly as possible to intimidate others. The very sight of a huge metal bull already caused fear in the crowd. The story of the bronze bull is so terrifying that documentary videos are still being made about it and books are being written. This is one of the most terrible methods of execution in the history of mankind. Deba. The rack was one of the most terrible instruments of torture in the medieval world. The victim was tied by the hands and feet to a special wooden structure or ropes, after which the body began to slowly stretch. Due to the strong tension, the joints came out of their places. The muscles and ligaments were torn. The person felt incredible pain long before serious injuries. In some cases, the torture lasted for hours, until the victim lost consciousness. The whip was most often used during interrogations to force people to confess to crimes or give up information. Especially often, such torture was used on suspected conspirators, spies, or political enemies. In the Middle Ages, the authorities considered torture an effective way to obtain the truth. Many people even confessed to fictitious crimes just to stop the torment. In the gloomy dungeons of castles, the whip became a real symbol of fear. Today, this instrument is often shown in films and museums of medieval torture. Spanish boot. The Spanish boot was a special metal or wooden device for torturing the feet. Heavy plates or boots were placed on the victim's feet, and then they were gradually tightened with screws. The pressure was so strong that bones broke, muscles tore, and joints were crushed. Sometimes wooden wedges were additionally driven between the plates to increase the pain. The person often screamed in pain even before serious damage occurred. This type of torture was widely used during the Inquisition and political persecution. The Spanish boot was used on heretics, traitors, and people suspected of conspiring against the government. In those days, even a simple denunciation could be enough for arrest and torture. Many victims confessed to any crimes just to stop squeezing their legs. After such torture, people often remained disabled for life. The very sight of this instrument caused real horror among prisoners. Planting on a stake. Impalement is considered one of the most brutal methods of execution in history. A long, pointed wooden stake was driven vertically into the ground, and the victim was then impaled on it. The executioner tried to make the death as long and painful as possible. In some cases, death occurred only after many hours or even days. This method was especially famous for the ruler Vlad Tepes, who was later associated with the legend of Dracula. This was how enemies of the state, prisoners, criminals, and rebels were punished. In the Middle Ages, such executions were often carried out publicly to intimidate the population and enemy armies. According to legend, Vlad the Impaler left thousands of bodies on stakes near cities, so that enemies could see the power of his power. The spectacle was so terrible that many people fainted during the executions. Because of its cruelty, this method became a symbol of medieval terror. Even today, stories about impalement are considered some of the most terrifying in the world. Mask of Shame. The mask of shame is a medieval instrument of punishment and torture, used in the 16th–18th centuries, mainly in Great Britain and Germany. It was intended for the public humiliation of people, mainly women caught in gossip, foul language, quarrels, or witchcraft. The design was a heavy metal frame that was worn on the head. It included several characteristic elements: gag, a metal plate or spike that was inserted into the mouth. He pressed the tongue and did not let the person speak, and when he tried to open his mouth or speak, he caused severe pain. Lock. The device was fixed on the back of the head, and on some masks a long bell or chain was attached to attract the attention of passers-by. Form. Masks were often made in the form of grotesque faces, donkey heads, or other animals to visually emphasize the reason for the punishment. How the punishment was carried out. The victim was chained in a mask and led through the streets of the city or tied to a shameful pole in the market square. Neighbors could spit at the convict, throw rotten vegetables, and laugh at him. Thanks for watching. Like and comment really help the channel. Subscribe so you don't miss new videos. See you soon.